abandoned at sea in bigger and bigger numbers and in bigger and bigger boats. Would-be migrants are left adrift off the coasts of Europe. Are the people smugglers resorting to dangerous new tactics? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm David Foster. Welcome to the programme. Migrants who are making the journey by sea to Europe from the Middle East and North Africa are facing alarming new dangers. Suspected traffickers are being accused of abandoning ships in rough seas. The European Union's border control agency Frontex, which took the lead from Italy in November, has reported 6 such incidents since the beginning of December. This week, the Blue SKYM cargo ship sailing under a Moldovan flag was abandoned by its crew with almost 1,000 people on board, most of them said to be Syrian and Kurds. The rudder was reportedly jammed with the packed vessel set on a collision course with the Italian shore. Coastguards brought it under control and safely docked it at the port of Gallipoli. On Friday, the Icelandic coastguard, operating as part of Frontex's Operation Triton, rescued a one-time livestock carrier with 450 migrants on board. The Ezadeen had lost power off the southeast of Italy with no sign of the crew. It was sailing under the flag of Sierra Leone and appeared to be registered to a Lebanese company. Well, there's been a surge in migrants heading for Europe in the last 12 months. The route many take is from North Africa to Italy or Greece, escaping wars in Iraq and Syria, poverty and unrest in the Horn of Africa and West Africa, and chaos in Libya and Egypt. According to the Italian Interior Ministry, 60,000 migrants arrived in the country in 2013. Last year, that figure almost trebled to more than 167,000. And their journeys are more dangerous. In 2013, the United Nations estimates that 600 migrants died or went missing at sea trying to cross the Mediterranean. Last year, that figure increased to more than 3,000, and larger vessels are being used. What was a seasonal migration has become a year-round pursuit, if you like. Now, the thoughts of our guests on this Inside Story. Joining us for the discussion from Geneva, Joel Millman from the International Organization for Migration from Warsaw. Ewa Moncure talking on behalf of Frontex, that is the European Union's border control agency, and also in Geneva, William Spindler from the UN's refugee agency, the UNHCR. Mr. Millman, I've spelled out some of the facts behind 2014. Disastrous year for those trying to get across to Europe from North Africa and the Middle East. Why so bad?
Well, we saw a confluence of different events. One of them was the increasingly dire situation in Syria, which sent tens of thousands of people out of the country. Many of them found their way to Libya, Egypt, other points of departure where they could reach Italy. They're starting to leave now in greater numbers from Turkey. The other development, of course, that mattered was the collapse of authority in Libya itself. A lawless coast, large fighting by militias. Some of these militias then drifted into kidnapping, extortion, and other crimes that led to holding hundreds of thousands of people that they were able to force onto boats after paying ransom and put them into the sea to be rescued on their way to Italy. So those were two events that combined to turn a sort of an ad hoc industry into something much more systematic. Also, of course, the continuing flow of refugees or migrants out of Eritrea contributed to the flow, as well as sub-Saharan Africa, which became a huge contributor of migrants through that route all through 2014.
Ewa Moncure, let me come to you. Operation Triton, part of Frontex's border controls. It's the one that operates around the coast of Italy. Do you think it's working?
Well, it's one of the larger operations of our agency, and we are assisting Italian authorities with border control. And in this particular case, we are assisting authorities with search and rescue. And as we speak, we are involved in a search and rescue operation of over 450 migrants. So we are, as far as that's concerned, yes, we are helping.
Is it as good as the system that was in place before, the one that was operated entirely by the Italians?
Well, I think I need to explain who we are, because we are a border control agency. So our job is to be at the border of European countries and assist with border control. What happens at sea is we are assisting, we are at the border, but when a search and rescue incident is declared, we are called upon very often by the authorities to assist with search and rescue. So that's what we are doing.
William Spindler in Geneva, I mean, this is part of the problem, is it not, is that Operation Triton's remit is pretty limited. It's not there to do anything other than to protect the borders of the European Union.
That's right, and what we are seeing is not just unprecedented numbers of people crossing the Mediterranean. We're also seeing the proportion of those fleeing war and persecution increasing. So many of these people are actually refugees who are fleeing for their lives. And it doesn't matter how many doors we close to them, they will always find a way to come to Europe, because for them it's a question of life or death. So just by focusing on controlling migration, we are risking creating conditions where people will be more at danger. And this is what we are seeing in the last few days.
Joel Millman, you went into some of the ideas behind the extra sophistication, if you want to call it that, of the people smugglers. But has there been an obvious shift to bigger vessels, more of a business venture than perhaps just the ad hoc bits and pieces here and there?
Well, you'd certainly come to that conclusion from looking at what's happening in Syria right now in the Turkish coast. I think the reliability of the flow has probably persuaded some of the traffickers to say, let's hire bigger boats, let's systemize these kind of tactics. We know that we're going to see so many thousands of people a week or so many thousands a month coming for our services. We can set a price that we can rely on, and we know what our profit's going to be after we pay for a derelict vessel and a few crew members to get it out to sea. That's something you didn't see earlier this year when a lot of the time the groups were operating sort of a cat and mouse, running from the authorities in Egypt, fighting off rival militias in Libya. But what seems to me that what's happening now is a kind of a regular flow out of Syria that gives a certain predictability to what the traffickers can do with their cargo and how to manage it. And it appears in these first few days of this new year that with this new tactic of these large fishing boats, that's what they've chosen, and they're probably testing the response of Europe, in that period between when Mare Nostrum comes to an end and Frontex assumes responsibility. But I don't think that's going to change the main equation, which is that this is demand-driven, and the demand is coming from migrants, fleeing terrible conditions in some of these countries, particularly Syria.
And there's an element to this which struck me as particularly tragic. I think you mentioned it to our producer, which is that you talk about the crews taking the vessels out to sea, but the people who then crew them from there on in are not trained crew. They are probably the migrants themselves who are put in control of these massive vessels and then told to take them across to the coast of Italy or whatever when they have no idea what they're doing.
Well, we've seen terrible, terrible catastrophes earlier. Just a few months ago off Malta, there's a suspected sinking of over 500 people aboard. We tremble thinking about what's going to happen in the weeks ahead if this is the tactic they're going to use. They're obviously taking advantage of the humanity of the European governments that are committed to saving human lives, but it's quite a risky operation. I mean, their job is done once the traffickers I'm speaking of. Their job is done once they've received their pay, and then you're right. I mean, their cargo is at the mercy of the elements and time and weather. I mean, we have people dying of hypothermia, for God's sakes. It's the middle of winter, so this is extremely cruel kind of passage, and. It's just from the point of view of IOM, it's just a tragedy that people are already fleeing such terrible conditions, and this is what they're subjected to just when they're trying to reach safety.
Eva, from a human point of view rather than just from a business point of view, I mean, I know you work for Frontex, the job is to protect European borders, but as somebody who's seeing the changing nature of what's happening with these people smuggling routes for these migrants, you must be particularly concerned.
I would like to make clear that we always participate in search and rescue, and most of our maritime operations, in particular the operations that are ongoing right now, like Operation Triton, are primarily search and rescue. So search and rescue we do all the time. We have always done it in the past and will do in the future. What we are seeing at the moment is a change, as was mentioned by other speakers, that larger vessels are being used, which is allowing smugglers to smuggle hundreds of people in winter time, which was not possible before because of very severe weather conditions. Now, using larger boats, who are also very dangerous and driven by migrants themselves or abandoned completely, but that allows smugglers to put more people and don't stop the smuggling of migrants over winter period.
Mr. Spindler, I mean, are the smugglers, these businessmen, if you like, becoming more able to dodge the authorities? Are they working out new routes? Are they finding ways to get hold of these bigger ships that the authorities don't yet understand?
It seems that with increasing patrolling of the seas between Italy and North Africa, smugglers are looking at other routes. And in the last few weeks, we've seen many boats coming all the way from Turkey or the Middle East to Italy. So it seems that smugglers are taking longer and more dangerous routes to bring people to Europe.
Any idea where they get hold of these? Any idea where they get hold of these vessels?
They seem to be buying them and then just putting a few crew in them, which later on disappears. And the boats are put in automatic pilot and sent on a collision cruise, collision route towards Europe. They have no regard for people's safety or lives. This is clear that they are just interested in making money. But people are so desperate, refugees are so desperate that they are willing to put their lives in the hands of these smugglers.
Joel Millman, there's obviously a pretty big business operation behind what's going on. We're talking about if you pay $5,000, you might get a rubber boat that takes you from Libya across to France. But if you pay $1,000, it'll take you to Italy because the chances of you getting caught are that much greater. Have any of the, if you like to call them that, Mr. Bigs, those behind all of this, been caught? Is any sort of effort being put into that?
We do know a week ago, Italian authorities released the name of a trafficker they said was a super boss based in northern Egypt. We don't know what's been the result of releasing this to the public. Can't imagine that this individual hasn't heard that his name has surfaced and wouldn't then go into hiding, or perhaps he was already been arrested by the Egyptian authorities. That's one of the rare cases that we've heard of where a person's been named as a major trafficker. At IOM, we've developed a lot of leads via the family members of victims. People have forwarded to us the cell phone numbers that their relatives were using, the websites that they access to find migrant traffickers. And some of this information is getting out to prosecutors and police. We're always confident that these are organizations that can be penetrated and put down, but they spring up almost immediately. It's no different than narco trafficking in South America. They bring down one group, another one takes its place. You know, there's tremendous demand to leave conflict, and traffickers know how to meet that demand and take people to safety. So, of course, we want to see more prosecution and more efforts made, but the idea that there's one central organization and you can stop this, I think it's just not true.
So Eva, on behalf of Frontex and the entire European Union Border Protection Agency, when I read in The Guardian that there's a guy they've found who's making, he claims, $1 million a week from smuggling these migrants into Europe, do you know where to go looking for the people who are behind this? Do those people that you liaise with know where to go looking for the controllers?
No, Frontex does not conduct investigations. What we do as part of our operations, we deploy what we call debriefers. These are officers who work with the national authorities, for example, in Italy, who interview migrants and gather information from them about people smugglers. And that information is then passed on to the national authorities, who then can start an investigation. So we do assist with that, but we do not investigate ourselves.
OK, but I mean, you're talking to people day in, day out who are involved in this sort of intelligence work. Is it your sense that most of the operations are local? In other words, those out of Libya are run by Libyans, and those out of Syria and Turkey are run by people from those areas? Or are we seeing big gangs moving in to take advantage of what they see as an opportunity?
I wouldn't generalize here. It really depends who is traveling from where, what nationality, how it is organized. There, of course, when there were most departures were from Libya, there were Libyan militias involved, but then there's also middlemen. And when we consider that some migrants travel from West Africa, they go through many networks and through many smugglers. So it's quite complex.
So, you see, Mr. Spindler, one of the things that I was wondering when I was researching some of this is, let's take Eritrea. Massive amount of people coming out of Eritrea. They're not coming from Djibouti, they're not necessarily coming from other countries in that area, Ethiopia, but massive amounts of people coming out of Eritrea. Somebody must have spotted that there was a chance to make a great deal of money out of moving these people on. Is that your sense of it?
Well, this is clearly a well-organized operation involving criminal gangs. But what we mustn't forget is that these people are fleeing human rights violations, conflict, war, and they are desperate, and they will go to any lengths to find protection. And the thing that we need to do, in our view, is to find legal, safe ways for refugees to reach Europe, through resettlement programs, through humanitarian admission schemes, through sponsor arrivals, through family reunification, student visas, and so on, so that people don't need to risk their lives in this way and resort to smugglers to find protection or a better life.
I understand that, but is it not pretty important too to go back to the source of the problem, not necessarily the conflict, but the source of the problem when it comes to the treatment of the movement of migrants, and take the head off there before you offer these safer routes, which would then perhaps prove more attractive to them?
We need to do all these things. We need to obviously combat this organized smuggling of people. And these criminal activities need to be stopped. But that is not the root cause of the problem. Most of these people are fleeing poverty or conflict. And what we're seeing is the inability of the international community to find solutions to conflicts such as that in Syria and to prevent new ones from starting. And with this proliferation of conflicts at the borders of Europe, the situation in Libya, the situation in the Horn of Africa, the war in Syria, the situation in Iraq, the conflict in Ukraine, all these situations are pushing hundreds of thousands of people, and some of them try to find protection in Europe. So this will continue as long as the international community is paralyzed and cannot find solutions to these conflicts and prevent new ones from starting.
So let me come back to you, Eva, once more. Operation Triton is very new. We're only a couple of months into it, but with the amount of money that you are given, it is, if you'll excuse the phrase, perhaps a drop in the ocean compared to what you need to combat or to help in this situation. Do you expect it to be expanded?
If the situation continues, it's likely that the operation will be expanded, but I would like to clarify that Frontex has been present continuously initially with our operations for over a year and a half, and Operation Triton is a continuation of other operations that were present there. So we've been present in the region since the very beginning, when the influx of migrants started in the central Mediterranean.
Okay, so how difficult is it for you to operate on the budget you've got at the moment?
Well, we have, with the launch of the operation, we've used all the funds we had available within the agency, and we also received additional funds from the European Commission to launch the operation in the beginning of November. Now the new year comes, we have a new budget, and then depending how long the operation will continue, we'll see if we will need additional funds as well.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like the need is going to go away. I mean, we've seen record figures for 2014. No reason why 2015 shouldn't be any better. So you probably are going to need any more money. You probably are going to need a great deal more money. Do you think you'll get it?
We've been in these situations before, during Arab Spring, for example, when we had to start all our operations in February and we received additional funds. But let's not forget the mandate of the agency. The agency is a